Information is power.
It's time now for Igniting Change, a weekly provocative and empowering program where you, the listener, can ignite change. Now here's your host, Barbara Onwine.
Get up, stand up for your right. Get up, stand up.
Welcome to
Stand up for your
Igniting
right.
Change. Oh, we got a great show for you today and week to the show. Let me bring up my mighty co-host. You know, the one and only chair of the board of the Transformative Justice Coalition, one of the nation's most brilliant attorneys, a fighter, a strategist, a bold leader. You know I'm talking about none other than Daryl Jones. Hey, Daryl.
Hey, Barbara. It must be Tuesday. It must be noon Eastern Standard Time because we're talking about igniting change. Barbara, what an incredible show we have set up today. Just incredible. We have incredible guests that we're going to be speaking to. Barbara, we would be neglectful if we did not just take a moment to put our hearts and our minds and our well wishes to the families and the community in Shreveport, Louisiana, where those 7 little children were killed. Actually, 8 total, but 7 of the 8 children, biological children, were killed and shot his wife and everyone else. It was a horrible situation. We'd also want to extend, Barbara, our heartfelt condolences to the family and friends of someone we got a chance to meet, Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax in the Virginia area, and his wife, Dr. Serena Fairfax. So certainly, Barbara, we want to be certain to extend our condolences to those families and their friends, and just remind everyone, Barbara, that mental health is real. As we come up to May, which is Mental Health Month, let's be certain that we're encouraging our family and friends to take those matters seriously, Barbara.
Very much so. And to remind people you don't own any other person. There's no such thing as owning other people. And in love, true love, is the ability to know when to let go. Folks, this is a serious issue. Clearly, there has been so much pain, and I sadly know too many people who have been affected by the Fairfax tragedy. So I just, pray, as Daryl said, that people will seek help and that we will learn better and let go of some of the toxic masculinity and other concepts that we have built into our culture that are very counterproductive and dangerous, as we saw. So, folks, there's so much to talk about. Come on now, one on the upbeat. We got to celebrate. We got a celebration time. Come on, because the SAVE Act failed again in the Senate. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. It's gone for this moment. Now, they're going to try to resurrect it through some other little shenanigans, but we will be on it. Thank you to the millions of you who called in to your senators and raised all kind of canes saying no SAVE Act. Thank you for all our listeners who have been listening to us and dialing that Senate number and saying no SAVE Act. We're grateful to you. We really commend you. We are glad that we have gotten over this particular hurdle for this moment, but the fight lives on, and that's why we got our show today. Right, Daryl?
Absolutely, Barbara. And we got to also remind people that if you're in the state of Virginia, today is election day, and they have the big issue on the ballot with regards to the redistricting there. Be certain you make your way to the ballot box and have your voice heard, Barbara. Isn't that right?
That's right. I know if I were there, I'd be voting yes. All right now, but we have all kinds of things to talk about. Let's get into our show because most of you may not know that there's an incredibly critical event coming up. May 1st is May Day, and our show is entitled The People United, May Day Strong, Day of Action, and RFK Jr.'s dangerous black child reparenting proposal. What in the heck? We're going to talk about all of that today, and we can't wait to get into our show. We have some amazing guests. Woo! We have some of the top guests with us today. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce President Stacy Davis Gates. She is the president of the Chicago Teachers Union and executive vice president of the Illinois Federation of Teachers. Before she was elected CTU president in 2022, Davis Gates served 4 years as vice president of the union. Prior to that, she was the CTU's political and executive director. In fall 2019, she helped lead a 15-day strike and negotiated a historic contract that provides for smaller class sizes, ensures a nurse and social worker in every Chicago public school, secures sanctuary protections for immigrant families, and supports students and families experiencing homelessness. In 2017, Davis Gates was elected chair of the United Working Families, an independent political organization for working class people and movements. She also serves as a board member for the Action Center on Race and the Economy, ACRE, a nexus for organizations working at the intersection of the struggle for racial justice and Wall Street accountability. Ooh, do we need that? Davis Gates is currently on leave from the classroom where she taught high school and social studies for over a decade at Inglewood Clemente and Mason Community Links High School. She attended St. Mary's College, the University of Notre Dame, and Concordia University. Davis Gates lives on the south side of Chicago with her husband and 3 children. It is our pleasure to welcome back to Igniting Change one of the most exciting leaders in our country, President Stacy Davis Gates. Hi.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We're so glad that you could take the time from your very busy schedule to join us for this very important discussion about May Day, and then we're going to talk about RFK. Woo! That's another one. So we can't wait to get into that, into our show. We will be joined at 12:15 by Dr. Dibinga Omekongo, but we will introduce him at that time. So we're going to start off with first question. Some people are saying May Day, but what are you talking about? May 1st, what's going on? What's going on? What's happening? President Gates, can you please tell our listening audience from all over the country and in the 13 nations what we're doing on May 1st?
Well, what we're doing here in Chicago on May 1st is a couple of things. I am a high school history teacher, and so it is a very important objective for our labor union to create the capacity for our young people to understand the roots of patriotism in this country. And the roots of patriotism in this country didn't just happen in 1776. The patriotic roots of this country also manifested when our ancestors left plantations and quest of their liberation. And May Day, quite frankly, it starts with their general strike. Their general strike crippled the Confederacy, making the Civil War, winning the Civil War, and an impossibility to the Confederacy, which may now be known as MAGA. We are in a position in this very moment to square the story in a way in which all people can find themselves. And I often think that the labor movement doesn't do a good enough job bringing in Black people, Black workers in particular, and telling them that we are actually the foundation of the labor movement. Remember, our people toiled for centuries as unpaid labor. The very basis of capitalism, both in this country and worldwide, is predicated on Black bodies being in bondage. So when Black bodies organized with abolitionists, both Black and white and female-led, what they did by leaving these plantations is force a reckoning with the Confederacy. They get to lose the Civil War. But with the Union Army, we were able to create the capacity to get the Freedmen's Bureau. The Freedmen's Bureau is public. It is the public good. You get public education. You get public housing. You get DEI programs through freedmen's schools. White women become teachers of black children in the South. These are all the byproducts of when workers make a stand and say what they're not going to do again. In America, black workers have made America better. It has offered a more inclusive version of America. So our work on May Day is, number one, to get that history out, to empower. Because if I hear one more person say, well, where are the black people at these marches? I'm not sure that people understand the basis under which this country operates and how black people have always shown up and how they've shown up as workers. So on May Day, I think our union has a very strong objective to clarify the value of black workers, the power of black workers, and how it is intrinsically attached to this moment, and how by seeing black workers, we can invite, we can make room for more black voices in this movement.
Wow, that's really powerful, President Gates. And let me ask you, is the request then on May the 1st for workers to not show up for work? What exactly are you asking people to do or not to do?
Well, here in Chicago in particular, as president of the Teachers Union, what we were able to negotiate with our school district is an opportunity to have a Civic Day of Action. And the Civic Day of Action gives our educators a chance to engage our young people on the origins of May Day. May Day happened here in Chicago. Workers were fighting for dignity, a work day, benefits, something that, expressed justice, equity, and parity. And they faced grave consequences. Leaders of that particular movement were sentenced to death. These are things that our young people have to understand, and it happened right here in Chicago. I think another thing that's important is showing our young people through their experience how they get to lift their voices in very similar ways in allyship with all components of our society to get what they need. Again, in order to bring mass movement, you also have to provide political education. And there's no better way of offering political education than through the story of America. We get to this America because of strikes. We get to this America because people left plantations and expected, demanded, and worked for America to be better. The 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, those amendments don't just benefit black workers or black families, they also benefit America. So on May Day, we are asking for a few things. We're asking for mass engagement. We're asking for our parents and our families and our students to be engaged on the things that make America really great, black workers. We are asking for our city to honor a movement that is saying people deserve their dignity and that all people can stand together in community to make that happen. Look, we have a lot of differences in this country, but we have to connect on community. And so what we're saying on May Day here in Chicago and elsewhere is create community. Workers get to create community. They get to create and we get to amplify and show our power. So, yeah, no work, no school, no shopping. And for teachers, educators, it is especially important that we provide the education of how we get to this country that can offer so much and sometimes gets off track.
Wow. And can you tell our audience about who the partners are in this fight? I know students have been organizing for May 1st so that they will also be out of class but engaging in activities, including political education, as you mentioned. Tell people about some of the partners and about some of the organizing that's going on nationwide.
We are organizing with everyone under the sun in this moment. There are unions all over this country. Last year, I think that there were almost 1,500 May Day demonstrations across the country. We believe we are going to triple that number this year. So there are labor unions allied with community organizations all over the country. And they're also making their call micro. So here in Chicago, we're saying school funding is the politics of the moment, that young people deserve fully resourced, fully funded school communities. So the political education for our young people is to connect them to what they deserve versus what people provide them. These are the things that are happening around the country. There will be a teen summit here in Chicago. There's much being said about our young people all over this city. How about our young people get to say something? How about we figure out where the natural connections are? Look, what's happening in this country, the impact is going to rest with young people that are in our school communities right now. They get to say something about what they need. They get to be in spaces where people are organizing for justice. And here's the other thing. We get to listen to them, too.
I love that because, I started as a high school student organizer. And that's where I got the beginning of my political consciousness and, fighting for justice for students. And that's where I kind of awakened. So it is so great to hear that this is a movement calling the students in, saying, be the leaders that you are meant to be. This is a great, great, great program. Let's talk about for people who are listening, they're saying, okay, all right, now I get it. I understand this is going on. How do I become part of this? How do I go and get information? How do I find out what might be happening in my local community? How do I join May Day Strong?
Well, go to the May Day Strong website, and you can see everything that's going on around the country. There's a map that's populated on the website. You should be able to click on any part of that website and get the information that you need from the website. And you can fill in. And here's another thing. If you're a community group in a labor union that wants to do something, go on that website, send us a note on May Day Strong, and let us help you connect with other people that we may know in or around your city, in or around your region, so you can connect with them. It's May Day Strong. We have a website. They're populating all of the things that are happening in all of the different locations. Again, this May Day is going to be so much bigger than the May Day that we had before. And the great thing about this, especially for a history teacher, is that we're actually going to have a conversation about May Day, about labor, and about the fact that workers are the infrastructure of this country. If this country is great, it's not because of some billionaire guy in the White House. It's because of the workers and the communities and the neighborhoods and the cities and the counties and the states that are making it great. Workers form the core. Workers are the tax base. Workers are the people who send their children to public schools. Workers are the people who need our cities and our states and our counties to support them. These are workers. And so it is past time that this country gives its just due to the needs of workers. And those workers are Black. Those workers are female. And Trump has done a very good job of firing Black women all across the federal government in his quest to make America ungreat again.
Absolutely.
Wow. President Gates, you're right on the mark, and we encourage everyone to go to maydaystrong.org, and look at the map and find out where there's an activation near you, and then become involved and become engaged. Barbara, I got to say this part because now, as President Gates was speaking, I've been reading Black AF History by Michael Harriot, and everything that she's talking about the plantation that went on, and how enslaved people changed the face and changed the economics of the South in the fight. It's all right there in Harriet's book as well. So we encourage you to certainly come out to these movements. Go to maydaystrong.org and join in one of those activations. Is that right, Barbara?
Absolutely. And if you're African American and you've been reading all this stuff about how do black people get involved, why should black people be involved, black folks should sit home, whatever, I want you to go to Black Connections Desk. Black Connections Desk, DESK.org, and see all the great information that will help you hook up to all these great mobilizations that's happening around the country that will help you to answer your questions that you might have about engagement. We want our people to show up. We want you to feel safe. We want you to do what's necessary to develop and sharpen your leadership skills. So blackconnectionsdesk.org is a resource for our community. Please use it. Daryl and Stacy, as we're talking right now, the issue of black children has arisen slowly because of the advocacy, because of a black woman congresswoman speaking out and calling out one United States Secretary of Human and Health and Human Services, Mr. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for his proposal on removing.
Barbara, you had to mean doctor, right? You got to be a doctor to be HHS secretary, don't you? You got to have an MD.
No, you don't. I mean, apparently you don't, because this what made Congresswoman Terry Sue throw one hole to the other was that she pointed out that he is not a medical doctor and that his wacky, bizarre theories is rooted in that ignorance. But before I get into that, why don't I let you bring up our other guest who's going to join us at this moment so that we can get into this RFK nonsense and explain to people why you need to be concerned. Don't just think this is something in his worm-infected or whatever head. This is dangerous, folks, and we're going to get into it. So, Daryl, bring up Dr. Omekongo.
Thanks so much, Barbara. But, certainly want to welcome back to Igniting Change a person who's not a stranger to Igniting Change and not a stranger to controversy or speaking up in controversial situations. Dr. Dibinga Omekongo is an award-winning leader. He's a diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism strategist. He's a certified virtual speaker, the John Maxwell Top 30 leader, author of Lies About Black People, How to Combat Racist Stereotypes and Why It Matters. If you haven't bought that book, you need to get it and read it because it's just an incredible, incredible piece. He's been featured on so many different radio shows and everything else. Every time I look up, Dr. Dibinga is in the middle of something else. Dr. Dibinga, welcome back to Igniting Change.
How are y'all doing? It's great to be here. How's everything?
Well, before we started reading all this stuff with regards to RFK Jr. and these comments about reparenting black children, wow, it's just incredible, incredible, incredible. So, Barbara, do you want to come with the first question?
Yes, President Gates was talking about history and how critical it is for us to know black history, to understand our contributions and the fights and struggles that we've had. And one of the hardest fights and struggles that we've had since the day we put the first black African enslaved people were brought to this nation in the 1600s, the fight has been to preserve our families. And family separation has been our reality. Let's talk about that. So, Dr. Gates, do you want to kick us off? And then Dr. Dibinga, do you want to join in illuminating that history for everybody listening? Because a lot of people just really don't know.
Listen, I've been reading and watching everything that's going on here now. Look, history is cyclical, and what we are experiencing are people in power, Secretary Kennedy included, that have a very archaic approach to humanity. And these archaic approaches coupled with anti-Blackness are dangerous, in fact, deadly, especially as we are talking about Black maternal health care. Regardless of socioeconomic backgrounds, we know that Black women are in the crosshairs when it comes to maternal health care. We also know that this is going to be exacerbated with the removal of support for health care from the federal government through the removal of subsidies for Medicaid. We're in trouble. So when people talk about the government and its distrust, it's rooted in these types of occurrences. In fact, it is our enslaved ancestors who said that America had a duty to offer health care. They only wanted a few things. They wanted housing, they wanted health care, they wanted education. That forms the basis of the Freedmen's Bureau, which forms the basis for the very place that Secretary Kennedy has the privilege of running right now. That comes from our people. What that also says to me, though, is that we haven't quite penetrated in a way that has policy follow its original intent, which is why it's important for teachers, especially this union, to provide the infrastructure where we might provide young people with an understanding both of their ancestors' intention and of their collective power when they move in concert. The impact of not doing those things are in having to listening to the blabbering of this secretary about reparenting Black children as if that inhumane experiment with our native tribes didn't fail grossly.
Wow. And Dr. Dibinga, I certainly want you to respond to it as well, but I want to be certain that our audience is aware of the situation that we're talking about here. And the situation that we're talking about is one where Secretary Kennedy, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., was sitting before Congress to give testimony. This is the first time in the year that he's done it. And he was being questioned by Congresswoman Sewell out of Alabama. And it was unexpected for him that Congresswoman Sewell was going to ask the question, but she asked the question if he had made the statement that every Black kid is now just standard put on Adderall, SSRIs, benzos, which are known to induce violence. He said that apparently when he was running in 2024 for the presidency. And, and those kids, he continued, are going to have a chance to go somewhere and get reparented, to live in a community where there will be no cell phones, no screens. You actually have to talk to people. And he went on and was touting his plan for wellness farms for these kids. Dr. Dibinga, talk to us. What's going on here with this reparenting stuff?
Well, if people just want to have a serious paying of attention to history, this is Nazi Germany reincarnated. And people need to be mindful of that. When people talk about Hitler and the youth camps and the re-education camps and the like, this is the language that we're talking about. And people have to be mindful of that. What RFK is representing, he's representing everything that is coming from the top of the administration. This is a man in Trump who slept with Hitler's books by his bedside. This is a man who's been fascinated with Nazi generals. Why can't my generals be more like Hitler's generals? He wants to recreate that, and so he has people within his departments that are willing to do the same thing. And so when we can talk about Hegseth, we can talk about RFK, we can run down the list. When RFK is talking about reparenting us, this is talking about Native American removal. Right? What did they do with indigenous communities here? Took them from their homes, cut their hair, made them sing songs like One Little, Two Little, Three Little Engines. Their philosophy was kill the Indian, save the man. They want to do those same things with our community. And that's why going to the top of your segment at the moment you brought me in order to do that, you have to be able to remove the history of Black people from the schools, from the corporations, from the television. You can't have shows like Roots and all of those things, because as soon as you can look at somebody as subhuman, you feel like you are permitted to do anything to them, including reconditioning them and reparenting them. And that is the core of what RFK is talking about. He is a racist to his core.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just so overwhelmed by this one because it's so vicious. Because let's be clear, he didn't say just send the kids, anywhere. He said these wellness camps that would be run by the federal government. Okay?
Right.
I mean, let's get this straight, that this was a program to reprogram our children to hate themselves, to become anti-black. I mean, this is dangerous. I recommend to everyone, if you haven't read Mitch Albom's book, The Little Liar, I recommend you read it. It is the story of a young boy in Greece who looks Aryan, but he is Jewish, and it's about how he is programmed by the Nazis when they invade Greece to mislead his own people to death. It is such a powerful book, and if you haven't read it, I really recommend that you read The Little Liar. It still stirs me every time I think of that story. And I also want people to know that I want to give a big shout out to Lawrence O'Donnell, who has been covering this. Oh, he went into it last week, and he went into it in depth yesterday. And he had the clips from Caroline Kennedy, who is the cousin of Robert F. Kennedy. And she went into the fact of how he led so many of his cousins into drug addiction, including one who died from drug addiction, how he actually would have them in his rooms and at events and parties where he was making sure that they had access to these high-level, intoxicating, deadly drugs like heroin, etc. So people, for him to be telling us, black people, about parenting, it is absolutely criminal. I just had to make that statement. Daryl, next question. I'm so sorry.
No. I appreciate that, Barbara. And, President Gates, one of the things that, when you start digging into the RFK Jr. history, as Barbara was just picking up, one of the comments that he also previously made was that we're never going to eliminate racism. We're hardwired to look for differences in other people and then to essentially practice racism. I don't think you can change that human nature. President Gates, does that mean we come out the womb racist?
I have no idea what it means. Like, I don't necessarily follow anything he says. It just seems completely unhinged and untethered from any science or common sense, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean no harm, but I don't understand, how we can just throw away tons and tons and tons and tons of science that has repeatedly been reaffirmed over time, I might add, through the generations, just because this guy says, something else. I just think people have to be very circumspect about how they engage in this moment. He works for an administration that advised people to drink bleach during the COVID crisis. I don't know how you take medical advice from those people.
Wow. Dr. Dibinga, I know that you wanted to weigh in certainly on the elimination of racism and how it can't be eliminated according to our Health and Human Services Secretary, because we are hardwired to be racist prior to our birth, presumptively. I could just feel you nipping at the bit to get in to talk about what this man is talking about and whether or not he should be over top of Health and Human Services making these types of decisions. I personally think, where are the impeachment papers? Where's Congressman Al Green? Let's impeach this man for this stuff. Help me out here, Dr. Dibinga.
One of the things that the Trump administration has ushered in is the destruction of expertise and the respect for expertise that we work to build this country on. Never perfect at it, but the idea of respecting education, respecting knowledge, they have ushered in this mindset where facts don't matter, and all you really need to do is be a white male, and people just automatically have to believe you. As somebody who works in this DEI space, as somebody who teaches intercultural communication, nobody is born prejudiced. But what is also true is that by the age of at least 3, people can start developing various prejudices, maybe even before that, based on what they are exposed to. It's about exposure, and I'll be damned if I'm going to take advice from somebody who's an environmental lawyer who is enthralled with killing bears, cutting off penises of raccoons, and going to take advice from him about race and racism. This is the problem with white male arrogance. They think that they can come out and speak about anything at any time and be considered an authority. And so the fact that he's just going to say we're all born this way, it means that we should just accept the status quo as is. We should just expect. Remember, Senator Bill Cassidy was actually a doctor from Louisiana. We should just accept the fact that, as he said, well, if you remove black women, our female mortality rate of pregnancy is pretty good. You know what I'm saying? It's like we should just accept that. We should just accept the police brutality that's happening at the hands of law enforcement. We should just accept the poor standards of what black children are receiving in our public schools. This is what they want us to do. They want us to accept that this is just how it is so they can continue to rule and be dominant over all groups that they see fit to dominate over, including black people. So this is not a man. There's nobody in that administration that we should be taking any advice from as it relates to the history of race and racism and what is ingrained and what is not ingrained in our culture. The only thing that's ingrained is their ignorance and their arrogance.
Amen. So this brings us full circle to our activism, because we know that at the time of the end of American slavery, during slavery, of course, they separated our families. The most powerful story on family separation is, of course, the story of Sojourner Truth. People should read about how she had to fight to get her son, who was sold down south, back. And that's what leads to her amazing advocacy during her lifetime. And people don't know that it's the time of the end of slavery with the 4 million black folks who were here in the United States at that time, that one of the most incredible stories is the story of blacks searching for their family members. And the ads, I mean, if you haven't read or looked at that period in our history, then you don't know our history and what it means and how much attacks there's been on our families, from Monahan to everyone, all to the present, trying to destroy black families. Dr. Dibinga, you've actually written on this subject. You have some amazing books. Why don't you just share a little bit with people about some of the writings you've done on the lies that they tell on us?
Well, in my last book, which is actually coming out on paperback in May, on May 8th, The Lies About Black People, I explore most of the stereotypes they have used to justify their oppression. The idea that black people are more likely to be criminals, so we need to make sure that we have tougher incarceration standards. The idea that black people can tolerate more pain, so we need more work to subdue them in terms of the police violence, or things like less epidural medication for black women who are having babies because they can tolerate more pain. This is a mindset that has led to where we are today. I tackle the mindset of black people can't afford housing and aren't good financially because we have bad credit, and I break down how financial government policies through the FHA that allowed black people to not be able to get loans, not to be able to live in certain houses. They talk about military veterans and, look at what, military veterans were able to do when they came back from the United States. Well, not black veterans, because the GI Bill was not set up for them. They couldn't get the educational loans. They couldn't get the housing. They couldn't get the access to cars and the like, and how that set us back. But people want to say, well, this is just how black people are, therefore they're not worthy of these services. Every chapter in my book, Lies About Black People, deals with this idea. The mindset that black people can't swim. Why is it that we've always had issues with swimming in this country? Go back to slavery. They didn't allow us to swim because they were afraid we were going to try to swim back to the African continent. And so they made sure that we weren't able to get into that water. And then when you talk about coming out of segregation, once desegregation happened, a lot of these white neighborhoods would let their community pools close and put concrete over them rather than let a black person swim in them. That's how deep it was. And so when we talk about at every barrier in our existence in this country, there's been a stereotype about black inability to be able to exist and subsequent laws to make sure that we cannot further improve in this society. And the fact that we're sitting here on this call as professors, as presidents, as lawyers, as radio show hosts and owners of our companies and running the Transformative Justice Coalition, it's a testimony to our greatness. It's a testimony to our perseverance, and it's a testimony to what we have done in spite of what they have prevented us from doing. And lastly, I will say the reason why all of this stuff that I'm saying is important, because as a professor, as an educator, just like my colleagues are the guests here, President Gates, it's like we are seeing the consequences every single day of a society that does not respect black history, and we are seeing it from not only the non-black students, but the black students as well. Malcolm said, if you think you never did anything, you're going to think you can never do anything. And so all this pushback about critical race theory and all of this stuff is to destroy the truth about black people so this entire country can believe that we are ignorant and worthy of the indoctrination that RFK is preaching about reparenting.
Woo! Wow. That is so powerful. President Gates, you spoke so brilliantly about the Freedom Bureau. Most people don't know that history, and they're not aware that the cycles that we live in, President Andrew Johnson, when he succeeded President Lincoln, who had been assassinated, that when the Freedom Bureau was instituted, what did he call it, everybody? He called it reverse discrimination against white people. Mm-hmm. Here you got millions of black folks migrating across the country trying to find somewhere to live because plantation owners now don't own them, so they done turned them off, turned them out, or trying to make them re-enslaved, and they're moving, looking for somewhere to live, and he has the nerve to call it reverse discrimination against whites. Dr. Gates, what does this history tell us about how we act in this particular moment in history?
You know, that's very interesting. I start off talks that I'm giving right now with there was a war that workers helped to bring to a close. And then after that war, workers created the basis for a more expansive and inclusive democracy. That's what I tell people, because workers did that. That's why May Day is important. And it is even more important to tell the right history. Look, there's a reason why libraries and books are in the crosshairs of neoliberals and Republicans, because it tells a history that isn't rooted in white supremacy. On the contrary, it tells a history that is rooted in the resilience of black people and the resilience of women and the resilience of our indigenous siblings. That is the resilience part of the history. And so when you speak about the history of Reconstruction from the perspective of a W.E.B. Du Bois, who calls it a general strike, who says it's one of the most consequential events in the history of our world, it brings power to us, not shame, not anything that isn't powerful. Our power is rooted in our ability to take the risk to dream of more and to do it allied with others, where all of us get a bit more equity, a bit more justice, a bit more of everything. And so when you talk about what's his name, Kennedy, as the Secretary from Health and Human Services, completely underqualified, in over his head, and dangerous to all, what we're also saying is that it is the destruction of an idea who came from our very people. Again, the Freedmen's Bureau was a response to the pleas, the demands of black people who would just save this country. They said, in response to us saving this country, These are the things that are necessary in order for us to engage in this society. So if you take it back to those roots, what you are doing is situating the MAGA movement firmly in the realm of the Confederacy and all of its little characters around, right? And so what we have to do right now, especially Black people, is talk about Black history. That's why Michael Harriot's book is so important. That's why revisiting Black Reconstruction by W.E.B. Du Bois is important, because we don't just find our resilience, we find the roots to the MAGA movement, and that these things, the things that they're fighting to take away, the things that they are fighting to marginalize, the things that they are fighting to change, the SAVE Act, it speaks directly to the 15th Amendment, right? Taking away the enfranchisement that we were able to win in the Constitution. When they take due process and birthright citizenship to the Supreme Court, that is another thing that our ancestors helped to create and expand for everyone. All of this is rooted in the results of a civil war that the Confederacy lost, and MAGA is reigniting the debate on.
Dr. Dibinga, as President Gates just so eloquently laid out, isn't it a reason that particularly Black folks should be involved in May Day and in similar social protests? Part of that about the ban on Black books, part of that about the denial of teaching of African American history that's being sanctioned and enforced by the government. A part of that is understanding what the impact of these policies from the administration is having on our community. Aren't all these reasons that more African Americans, more Black folks should be coming out to protest these policies, to protest what's happening with ICE, to protest all of these decisions that are having incredible impact on our community?
Well, it's like they say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And as Clay Kane talks about, if you don't do politics, politics will do you. And as Malcolm talked about, he said everybody should be a part of an organization. He didn't say you have to join my organization. You have to be part of something. Late Joe Madison, what are you going to do about it, right? We have to be fighting because so many of us are just passive. I remember in 2018 when I ran for city council in D.C., when I lived in D.C., and I was out getting signatures and the like, and one woman walked by me she said, I don't do that politics stuff. And everything that we do in this society is a result of politics. It's a result of decisions that were made by other people. And it amazes me that everything we're talking about, everything that you said is important. And we have to add to that the importance of voting. Because if you do all of these other works and you don't vote, it's almost pointless. Bayard Rustin said, we who organized a march in Washington, he said, we protested because we didn't have the right to vote. Now that you got the right to vote, he said it's in 1979, you don't need to protest because your vote is your protest. My argument is it needs to be both and, right? And so, yes, people have to join organizations. They have to learn. They have to do what the incredible students that you all are building every single day learn. I've met the students that you all are creating, and they're going to be changing the world. I can't imagine a world that we're going to have without them. And so, yes, you need to get in your civic organizations, your church groups, your mosques, and so on and so forth. They are coming for all of us. Lastly, I will say, one of the things that really bothered me is after Trump got elected, hearing all of these people talk about I'm resting.
Oh, watch
and I'm
out.
like, what the actual hell? You're like, yeah. And it's like, yo, I rest, I sleep. But but I wake up every day doing the work. But I felt like people who were using resting were using that term rest as a way of removing themselves from any type of responsibility to do the work. There's a difference between real rest to get yourself in position to do something that you can do on a daily basis than absolutely just running away from what's actually happening. And I hope that those people are seeing what the consequences of what's happening are right now and are really going to decide if they were actually resting and staying away to get in the game, because we need all hands on deck.
Thank you, Dr. Dibinga, and that is so powerful because I write a lot on LinkedIn, folks. Yes, if you want to see what I got to say about the world, then go follow me and Daryl. We both have our LinkedIn accounts, and I write a lot, and I just wrote in honor of the anniversary of the letter from the Birmingham jail. Just wrote a tribute to that book because most people don't understand that when Dr. King wrote that book, that he wasn't writing to the oppressors in the Neo-Confederacy South. He was writing to those of us who were criticizing him because we wanted to, quote, rest and sit back and wait and let others do the work. He was talking to us. So this mentality, when people think that everybody marched in the 60s, that's just not true. Not everybody marched in the 70s, but thank God for the ones who did. So, Daryl, as we close this show, I want to turn back to where we started. We really want to make sure everybody knows about May 1st. So let's go back to it, President Gates. Tell people again why, after this mighty show, why they must be involved in May 1st.
May 1st is about reclaiming our legacy as Black workers who have made this democracy more just, more equitable, more fair for everyone. The first DEI program for white women started with the Freedmen's Bureau when they got the privilege to educate Black children. Our ability to welcome immigrant children into this country and give them immigrant families into this country and give their children a start at life in this space comes from our struggle to win the 14th Amendment. These are things that, if told with the power and the resilience in which it happened, empowers and gives us a way forward with people who have been down for this democracy since day one. Again, Black folks ain't never had a problem being a part of any coalition that wins for all of us. And it is the duty of leadership right now, especially in the labor movement, to call forth the actual benefit of the voice, the courage, and the organizing of Black folks, especially with respect to a war. Remember, this was in response to a war for our humanity. The parallels are striking. We must, in this moment, remember our power, and in remembering our power, we must create the opportunity to teach and reteach and engage everyone about how workers, allied with community, led by women, create the capacity for a United States of America that gives immigrant families an opportunity to raise children as citizens in this country, a power that recognizes the ability of giving white women the ability to work outside their home, and Black people enfranchisement and citizenship. Come on. That is the power of Black workers. So on May 1, what I need to happen is for Black people to understand that this is our legacy.
Amen.
Phenomenal. And how do people get in contact with you, President Gates?
Oh, I'm here in Chicago, the best city in all of America and all of the world. I'll fight anybody about our skyline, the home of Operation Push. I'm at the Chicago Teachers Union, ctulocal1.org. I'm on Instagram most days, Stacy Davis Gates. All of the handles, Stacy Davis Gates.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Dibinga, folks want to know, how do they get a copy of that book, Lies About Black People, and your 15 seconds of closing remarks?
They can go to liesaboutblackpeople.com to get the book. They can get the audiobook. It's everywhere you sell books and download your books. You can learn more about me at upstanderinternational.com, and then on social media at Omekongo, Omekongo. People got to remember, at the end of the day, we are in the fight of our lives, and if you're not going to get into the fight, you are doing your ancestors a disservice.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Omekongo Dibinga, for being with us today. Thank you, President of the Chicago Teachers Union, Stacy Davis Gates, for being with us today. Folks, go to maydaystrong.org, maydaystrong.org, and get involved in the community. As we always say, it's time to get off the sidewalk, get into the street, get into some good trouble, and go check out blackconnectionsdesk.org. Until next Tuesday, noon Eastern Standard Time, peace, everybody.
Peace.